I'll start off with Dr. Lindberg. We have a lot of questions and interest in your exercising cattle. Wondering if you can quantify how exercise in feedlots affects morbidity and mortality.
Yeah, there was a paper done out of Iowa State University, research trial, to quantify the advantages statistically comparing exercising these cattle versus not exercising these cattle is very difficult, to say the least. It would all depend on who's doing it, the cowboy and their level of expertise, and how the other cattle are being handled as well. We've had a lot of people really want us to show that data, but it's very difficult for us to come up with a protocol that would allow us to show what we think the true advantage is. And we're working on that now. Actually, Ted Howard, that's part of our group that we send in the feed yards to help work with cowboy crews in terms of their horsemanship. If we do a trial, we want him to do it because he's very good at what he does. He's very consistent at what he does. And so as with any trial, you want to try and eliminate variabilities as best as you can, which is in the feed yard setting is very difficult to begin with, let alone in this sort of trial. So I can't give you a number.
A good feeling, though, obviously.
Yeah.
It's impactful. I'll have a follow-up question, and then if you need to leave anytime, feel free. What advice do you have for leaders and managers on working in multicultural staff environments?
I don't know so much in the swine industry, but in the beef industry, the bulk of the people I work with are Hispanic. And so it is very important to understand their culture and how they operate and how they think. It's different than us people of Caucasian background that have been in Americas for multiple generations. Most of the Hispanics I deal with are, they came across, quite a few of them illegally. Actually, I've helped a couple of them gain legal status. But you've got to understand how they operate. And a lot of it, honestly, it's just like what I said. It comes down to communicating with them. And I spend a lot of time with the people in the trenches rather than with the manager, although you've got to tie up those loose ends as well. But if you spend a lot of time with, like that picture of Manuel I showed you, we had twins in 2007, and my wife worked too, and we took them to a at-home daycare, and my wife left there the first day, as kind of probably most moms, but was mortified after she left there. And so we had that gal for a little bit, and then I thought there's got to be a better way, and maybe we can just pay for somebody to come to our home. And so I went to Manuel and said, I'm looking for a gal that wants to work full-time taking care of our twins. By the end of that day, we basically were talking to his daughter. She was going to JUCO. But one thing you have to understand about, that sort of culture is if they like you, they will do anything for you. And if you sit down with them and they're eating, you better eat with them, because if you don't eat their burrito or their tamales or whatever, they're not going to be happy with you. But that's communication, talking to them, care for them.
I agree. I've been invited to several quinceañeras from my past life.
Sure.
Any questions from the audience? No? One for the entire group. How will your species measure antibiotic usage in light of consumer and government expectations in the future? Go ahead, Greg, you start.
Well, first of all, when you're in egg production, it's a bit like dairy. You're producing a product every day that's going into the market. And so our opportunity to use an antibiotic is limited to things like BMD. I think that's an example of about the only thing that we can use right now. So it's not, in the layer industry, the antibiotic issue isn't at the same level as what it is in the swine industry. I would just flip-flop the welfare concerns on the cage and cage-free environment versus the antibiotic issue.
Others?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
How will you be measuring antibiotic usage with new regulations?
How will we be
Measuring or how change?
How will it change?
Yeah, a little bit about both.
Well, in the beef side, the VFD deal is coming full circle. It's enacted now, but we'll have to start writing VFDs starting January 1, 2017. And we've had to write VFDs before for, one particular antibiotic, but due to the regulations that the government put in place for us to even get to the point of writing a VFD to use it, most of us don't even use it. We'd rather just use the injectable drug and get it done and get it in the animal. We know it's in there, but it's potentially going to change our industry. Probably much like the swine world, there's 30, 40 of us, and there's impacts most of the cattle on feed. And so if we have to actually write an individual VFD for an individual drug for an individual pen, holy cow, we couldn't hire enough secretaries. But we're learning that's probably not going to be the case. But as I said with Dr. Traylor, the society wants us to use fewer drugs.
Yeah.
And so that's why we go back to case definition and how do we become more efficient with the products that we do use, and how do we preserve the products that we do use? Because BI, all these pharma companies, why would you invest $20 million on a product or 50 and have the government just say, okay, no, thank you, from an investor and answering to stockholders? Or for you guys, you're lucky it's family owned, but those things don't calculate into good revenue.
And Dr. Hawke, I know you said you didn't use a lot of antibiotics, but are international production standards held the same standards that we are in the U.S. for antibiotic use?
Well, I can't speak for every country that's producing fish, but the few trips I've made over to China, they didn't seem to have a lot of regulations as to what you could use. And
all that's being imported into the United States. So should I be worried about what I'm eating at dinner tonight?
I would.
I would?
In aquaculture in the U.S., we're down to basically the one drug is already a VFD. The Aquaflor is the one that's being used, so I don't see it changing our situation at all. But you get outside the United States, it's kind of like anything goes.
Made me a little concerned about tonight's meal. Another word of caution. Last night he said, don't eat live or freshly shucked oysters unless the water is 65 degrees or less. So keep that in mind if you're eating fresh oysters.
Well, that's just, if you don't want to ingest a Vibrio, you would probably not want to eat an oyster in the summer.
All right, good to know. Dr. Harding, any comments about antibiotic changes in your world?
I think some of the biggest things that's going to impact a lot of our small producers are record keeping. I know that PQA has set a really good standard for trying to improve a lot of the standards that we already have in place with the 10 good practices, but making sure that we're keeping record of what we're putting in the water, what we're putting in the feed is going to impact a lot of the people that we work with on a daily basis. Right now, I think a lot of the drive is for health and morbidity and mortality costs, but as well as cost itself. So that's what drives a lot of the use. And so if all of a sudden there's a lot of different barriers to be able to utilize that, that's going to impact us hopefully in a better way than what we've already been keeping in track today.
Are there any questions from the audience? I want to make sure we give you an opportunity to speak. Anybody? Dr. Rowles, you mentioned predicting the future, 20, 25 years down the road. How do we do that? How do we predict the future?
Great. Past performance is no indication of the future, right? Well, I think the mega trends that we see that have happened, in my career are going to continue. In the sense that if you look at the egg industry right now, it's like 10 to 20 years ahead of where I think the swine industry is going, which means continued consolidation and continued trends towards greater transparency with our customers. And I predict that producers will need to be more closely aligned with their customer in the swine industry, which means you'll see more vertical integration, I think. I think the packing plants that are being built are a reflection of that. In the egg industry, we sit directly across the table from Walmart. And so we're able to have those conversations on a regular basis. And we can give them feedback of what real costs really are. And in the swine industry right now, if you're just at the producer level, there's a whole group of layers in between that all have their own profit margins at place. And so when people say, well, we want pigs raised, without gestation stalls, by the time it goes through those different layers, and you don't necessarily get the same kind of profit incentives to encourage that production. And so I think you'll see more vertical integration in order to get that message directly delivered and received and respond accordingly.
Interesting comments. Listening to the consumer maybe too, more, less, or not, as they.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Do you listen more to the consumer? Are they dictating what your thought process is in the future?
Yeah, so it depends on how you define consumer.
Yeah.
And so for us, the consumer is the brand. Okay? It's not, again, it's the consumer that goes into the store is going to buy at a price point. The brand that we sell to is working to protect their brand. So the egg in an Egg McMuffin, there's egg and there's meat and hopefully they're selling a cup of coffee with it. And we're just one little piece. We're just one little slice of that. They're trying to protect their brand name, and that's different than saying, I'm going to buy a pork chop. Okay? It's the entree. We're just a piece of it, and so it's easy for them to say, well, we want eggs done this way.
Question for Dr. Harding. You mentioned antibodies can't necessarily measure immune protection. How do you work with producers who have that expectation?
I think you probably mean vaccine, can't necessarily.
Yes.
Correct? Sorry. So a lot of conversations, I have one producer that we have this conversation over and over again because he gets very frustrated if all of a sudden we're seeing flu or we're seeing PRRS. Well, why the heck am I even vaccinating for it? And because they've been inappropriately taught that vaccine equals I'm never going to get this disease. I think having that conversation with them that you're investing, you're making an investment, you're buying an insurance policy. Just because I make sure that I pay my insurance premium every month doesn't mean that hopefully I get into an accident every month, because otherwise I'd be out of a job real quick. I might be watching your kids. God save us all. But being able to have that conversation with them and really keeping it simple to be able to take what we learn from meetings or what we learn from different studies and being able to present that into a way that's actually applicable to the producer, so that you're going to have reduced clinical disease, but you're not going to see reduced transmission. It's not going to be okay, I'm never going to get this disease again. Being able to actually have that conversation with them and explain the science behind the vaccine.
We have time for a couple more questions. Dr. Hawke, you didn't mention your presentation, but do you deal with animal welfare issues in aquaculture?
Not so much in aquaculture. We do in our research, but
sure.
As far as the production animals, I think we're not seeing too much at this point. Fish are sort of, we've seen a tremendous change in the last 10 years as to how they're viewed as vertebrate animals in the laboratory, and I think it's just a gradual trend to where we probably will see some scrutiny with commercial production as well, but so far not too much with that.
Okay. We'll take one more question. Anybody last minute from the audience? No? Go ahead, Dr. Lowe, please.
Craig, we've talked about for years on spraying vaccines on pigs, and one of my partners actually does work with it doesn't look that much different, a bunch of weaned pigs and could be in a cart like that. How come we've never done that in pigs?
Yeah, why haven't we, What's the matter with you guys?
No comment.
No, I agree. I think, if anything, that when I was talking about the vaccine section today, I was trying to illustrate the point that the poultry industry has really looked at all alternatives in terms of routes of administration and methods of administration, and they've been forced to, because when you think of just the sheer quantity of animals that are being impacted. And so I would suggest that companies that provide those kinds of services will need to continue to put efforts into methods of delivery that are whole herd based as opposed to individual animal. And that's got to be a continued focus, I think. And I know obviously you guys have done that with a lot of your water delivered vaccines. What about flu? I mean, is there a way that someday that you could deliver a flu vaccine through an aerosol method without, hurting anybody that's...
If I could, I probably wouldn't be standing here today.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. But I think it's a good challenge for us as an industry.